Now, I could have used an angle brush and I could have floated the color on. That is another option, certainly, because that's, you know, originally when I started painting, that's what I did, was the corner loaded blend. This makes it feel a little bit more like an oil, and I feel like I have a little more control over where I put the colors. And if you're not good at corner loading and blending, this is another option. Anytime today that you feel you want to switch to the old way of doing it and do a corner load on your angle brushes, please feel free to do that. And in fact, let me just show you that right now. So let's say I wanted to do a corner load on an angle instead. I'd take my little angle brush. I would still load it with extender and then blot it off on the paper towel. Okay. Then I would take a corner load. Let me get my palette and camera here. Then I would dip the long tip into the color. Okay, get a corner load, get the extra off. So you want to make sure that you've got color on one corner and nothing on the short. So if I wanted to blend, let's say on the outside of the nostril now, by having that extender in there, it still helps. And then I just use the other end to soften. So you can try both ways. See, and I could have come up across the top of the eye with this too. I just want to give you options because everybody has a different comfort zone. And so if one thing isn't working, there's always another way to do it. So you've got to try a couple different ways and then just stick with the one that really feels easier to you. Okay. Okay, so, but I'm going back to my other brush because I like that better. Okay, so I've got, you want to put a shadow on the outside of the nostril, but instead of leaving it curved like this, I want to pull some back in across the bottom of the cheek and then soften that edge. So that it blends into the bottom of the cheek. Okay, now before I go any further, if I feel like I need to clean up my eyelid, I can come back right now, just a little liner brush, and fill that eyelid back in with a little bit of the flesh. Same on the bottom. To get those front edges a little bit cleaner again. Now, this next step that we're going to do is going to be connecting the shadow from in front of the eye to above the nostril. So we're still working on the very first picture. This is the part that is really hard to do with an angle brush. And so this brush makes it much easier. So I've got my brush still loaded with the dark color with the shadow mix. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to come straight down, and I want that to be a nice solid color, and I come straight down till I run into the nostril. Okay, I want to curve it into the cheek. All this is filled in right here. Curve it into the nostril. You need that little area to come in closer or it's going to make your nose look too big at the bottom. Then I'm going to soften all those edges. Flip the brush, soften those edges. And soften the edge inside the cheek as well. When you're using the extender on projects, if you're on a canvas, sometimes you need more extender in your brush. On a wood piece, a little less. You're going to be a little skimpier. So if it feels like you're lifting too much, try to blot your brush on the towel a little bit more and try to have a lighter touch. If you're just barely skimming the surface. Very light touch. So it's quite a wide area there. If you don't have that wide area, his nose is going to look really, really fat, especially at the bottom here. That's the first step. Now, if your shadow went up and touched your eyebrow, take some flesh, put it up there and kind of blend the shadow down. So any adjusting that you need to do, if you've got too much shadow somewhere, this is a good time to go ahead and make some corrections. Clean your brush in water, wipe it on the towel, re-dip it in extender, load it with your warm beige, and you can use that to lighten some of those areas you might have gotten too carried away and soften that where it touches the shadow color. If your cheek got too dark, put a great big circle in the middle of your cheek. Get the center filled in so it's lighter, and then soften around the edge of that circle. We're still going to do highlights, but I just want you to make any corrections that you need to if you got too carried away with the shadows. And this is just kind of a nice way to be able to blend and do that. Your nostril, I still want that to be the light, so fill that back in. Just soften that top edge a little bit. So any areas you need to touch up. Not worried about the crow's feet yet. Just the bigger areas, you want them to be smooth. You know, if you needed to do down the bridge of the nose, blend that where the front edge of your shadow is. This is a good time to do that too. Try and get that shadow under control before we do our highlight. Okay, then I'm going to clean my brush. Clean it in water, and then I'll dress both, and you can clean your blender brush too in water if you need to, or you can just dip it into the extender like I showed you earlier. Dip it in the extender and then just go in a circle, and the extender will also take the paint out of your blender brush. Make sure that that's clean for the next step. So then it's already dressed, it's ready to go. Same with my round brush. Dip it in extender, but wipe it all off on your paper towel. I want a lighter color, so I'm going to mix some white and some warm beige together. There again, half and half is probably a good recipe. And that's going to be our highlight color. Okay, so like I did before, plumping up my brush with that color. Really plump that up in there. I don't want it hanging on the outside, but I want the inside of the bristles to be full. Okay. Okay, so then we want to hit some highlight areas. Now, you're just going to look a little closer on that very first picture as to some highlight areas. We're going to be doing some in the cheek, the tip of the nose, the top of the nostril, might need a little up the bridge of the nose, maybe a little on that little bump in front, and a tiny bit next to the eye, above and below it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top of the nostril. I'm not going all the way down the nostril. I'm going to adjust the setting on my camera here. There we go. Now you can see my contrast better. Okay, so I've got it right on the top of the nostril. Flip my brush, soften that bottom edge. So I always start with a light touch first, and then if it's not moving, then I'll put a little bit more pressure on, do a little bit more of a scrub, but always try it just with a light touch to start with. Top of the nostril, and then I want to do the tip of the nose on the top and soften that underneath area. And I do want to soften the top edge on that too, because right now that's too harsh. Okay, I'm going to flip it upside down so I can reach it easier and soften that top edge. And then maybe pull a little bit on the front edge of the nose and stop where I hit that indent. Okay, and a tiny bit just on that front edge in front of the eyebrow there where the forehead sticks out a little bit. I want to keep the indent in front of the eye dark, but I want to pop that forehead out just a little bit. So I'm going to put this on the cheek, and I want it more on that upper kind of corner there. So take a look before I blend this. Okay, now I'm not touching the shadows. I'm still in the flesh area. And then I'm going to soften those edges. You know, and turn your piece around as needed so that you can catch those edges and get them to blend. Nice bright highlight, and if you need to do another coat after, you can. You could either do it right now or you can wait and come back later. So just do the best you can in that cheek area. I'm going to make my center just one more little thicker coat because I want that bright. Soft touch around the outer edges. I only scrub if I'm trying to remove. If I'm trying to blend, it's like butterfly kisses. Very, very soft. Very gentle. I also want a little highlight on the front edge of the eyelids. So I'm going to tap some in above that. I got some in my black here. Get that out of there. Okay, tap some in the front edge of your eyelid there. And just, sometimes you can just drag it a little bit and you don't even have to blend it. It'll just kind of fade in for you. I'm just going to touch up my pupil where I messed into it. Just fix that. So I'm going to do a little above and below the eye with this lighter color. Just on that front edge, and just kind of drags a little bit back. You may or may not have to blend it. Anytime my paint feels like it's dry on my brush, I take the tiniest little tip of extender and I use that to loosen up what's on my brush. And I keep using it rather than cleaning it because it'll reactivate that paint. And then I can keep using that same load. Okay, so one more thing I want to do with this color is break up some of those wrinkles a little bit. So if I've got like big areas, I'm gonna, or little teeny ones, and you could even switch to a liner brush at this stage, but I'm just gonna put some rough little lines in there, breaking up some of that dark for the crow's feet, and this, try to just soften, you know, like the starting and stopping points of them. Wrinkles are wrinkles, they don't have to be smooth, okay? So don't worry about blending these like you would the rest of your face. And if this looks too chunky here, add another wrinkle in here, add another line, and break up any of those big chunky areas. Just follow the curve of the face a little bit, break up some of those wrinkles. If you get too carried away and you need some of your dark back in there, go ahead and put some dark in there, and maybe even try just using a liner brush. So if I use my liner brush, get a little extender on it, blot it off, get some of my shadow color, come back in and just draw some lines with that. I can get some more shadow in there because maybe the round brush is too big for you. So you can always switch to a little liner brush, just some little sketched in lines. Let it be very rough. Once we get the hair on there, it's not going to look so funny. Right now it's at kind of a goofy stage. And I know that on your step-by-step photos, I have, you know, the next darker stage in there too. But I'm not going to let you do that till we get the hair in, because it's too hard to tell if you've got too much or not. Right now, this stage probably looks really dark to you on your pieces. And so until you get more colors around it, you're not going to know how much darker you want to get. So you're just going to kind of leave that be. But we can put a little bit of tint in the top of our eye next, and that'll be the phthalo blue. So to start with, I'm just going to use my liner brush, and if I need to thin it, I'm going to go ahead and just use extender to thin my phthalo blue. So let's get in camera here. Okay, so just a little drop of extender to loosen that up instead of water. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to outline the outer edge of my iris with this darker blue, and I'm not going to blend that, okay? But I am going to put some in the very top edge of it and only come about halfway. And then that little spot, I just want to carefully dab with my blender brush just to soften where I stopped with that dark blue. But I can have a hard edge on the outside of the iris. So you want it dark at the top of the iris, and then your aquamarine on the bottom. Outline the outer edge, just that one side with the phthalo blue. What I'd like to do is clean up a few little places under my face. For instance, this opening in the nose, for right now, I want everything under the nose to be this aqua color. And I want to clean up the bottom edge of the cheek there where the mustache is going to be, because I want this aqua to be showing through. So this little opening, and then under the nostril, under the cheek. Okay, so up on the fur area, what I did is I started with the rake brush and just use water to thin it down, and make sure that you can see the tips, okay? And I start with that outer edge of the fur and using my brush a little bit more at a chisel angle. And I'll do a row on the front edge. Step back, pull another row. Step back, pull another row. Step back, pull another row until you run into the back of the hat there, or the tail. And then if you can see fur on the back side of your tail on the outer edge, put a few lines there as well. The lines in the eyebrow are also the medium white, and I just did those with a little liner brush and some water. You still want to be able to see the black showing through. So you're following the picture in the top left corner of your step-by-step photo. And we're doing the fur and the eyebrow and the beard as well. So tail of the little ball on the tail of the hat, that also is the medium white, and you're just pulling your lines down. You still want to be able to see some of that black showing through. Okay, then in the beard, still using the rake, medium white, and you're thinning your paint about half and half. And in your little curls, I'm kind of starting and stopping with my brush strokes. I'm not trying to do it all in one great big step. I'm kind of doing it in like little curves, but following through with the same direction as I fill those in. The same when I get at the top here, and I'm going to follow those curves. I can start and stop. I just want to make sure that I'm connecting. Okay. If I get some areas that are a little bit thicker than others, don't worry too much at this stage, because we'll come back and do lighter and darker colors. But if you had an area that really bothered you, you can put some lines of your background color in there. So just really following through, and go right down off the edge of your page or the edge of your project. Get lots of curves. Now when it comes to right next to the face, I'm not going to go on the skin yet because I haven't done my detail. So I'm just going to tuck some little strokes in between the face and the hat to get it started. And we'll be using a liner brush afterwards to do some smaller detail, and especially like the edges of our curls and things. So this is just kind of the initial kind of filling in with little hairs to get the direction of the beard going. Okay. Okay, so there's that. Okay, then the mustache, I'm going to switch to a liner brush. I think it's just a lot easier. Still the same color, thin your paint with water, half paint, half water for liner brush consistency. And then I just want to, there again, get the direction of my mustache. Now you do want to make sure that your aqua color from your background goes right up under that nose area there. Okay, and let me zoom in while I do my mustache. You can see it nice and close. Okay, so I want just little thin lines. Now I'm going to leave space so that you can see the direction that I have pulled my lines. So I curve on the outside, and then they keep curving, but then they get longer and longer. Okay? And then pull backwards from the little curl or the tip. I'll be pulling backwards to get those in better. I still want to see a little bit of the blue showing through. But now I'm just going to go back and fill in with more lines, but I don't want it solid. And don't worry about the lip yet. And we'll be putting like brighter white tips on this after we do the lip. But this just kind of gets us started. So we have a little bit of a layer done there. Now I could, as long as I've got this on my liner brush, I could even right now just add a few little curves on the tips of those curls coming out on Santa, just a few of this color, so that I've got those, because it's too hard to do little tips with your rake brush when they're just small little areas. So just add a few more little curls, and then just make them kind of wind back in so that they look like they're connected. And I'm not worried if I overlapped a little into my holly leaves. I only put one coat on mine so far, and I'll touch those up after I get my beard done. I'll go back and I'll actually outline them, fill them in one more time, and it'll be a little bit better. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our face again, and we want to get some darker darks. And I'm going to use the burnt sienna to do that. Now, I like to use it full strength and just use my extender blending method to get all the areas darker. You'll see probably that your face softened just a little bit when we did our beard and things, and it'll all pull together once we get more color in there. Okay, so now we're looking at the middle picture on your step-by-steps, the bottom, middle, and look at how dark I've got some of those areas. We're going to be a little bit careful, go a little easy. If you're not sure, you can always come back and add another layer, but you'll find once we get everything on here, he's going to look paler than you think. So I like the dramatic bold from very light to very dark to get a dimensional look. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Dirty Dancer and start from the beginning again, where I load both ends with, in fact, that one was still dirty. So see, as soon as I put it in here, I could tell I had a little blue in there still. So both ends in the extender, and then wipe them totally off on your paper towel. Okay, then I'm going to take, and I'm going to use the burnt sienna, and if you need to thin that just a little bit, use the extender to thin it with instead of water. So I'm going to use just the tiniest drop of extender to loosen that. Mine was just felt a little thick. And I'd rather use extender, that way it already will blend for me. So I'm just kind of plumping the brush up, but I don't have a gob of paint on there. It's all inside the middle of the bristles. Okay, so now we're doing skinnier areas. If at any time you need to switch to a liner brush, you sure can. Okay, but I want to just, like, I'm outlining the outer edge of the nostril and just a little tiny corner above the mustache. So take a look before I blend it. It's not out as far as I did the first color. And then I just got to turn this so I can get a better angle for blending. I just want to catch that edge and soften it. So it's just like an outline on the outer edge of your nostril, and then filling in a little tiny corner underneath the nose. Okay, and then I'm going to go above the eye. There again, it's just like an outline above the eye, and little outlines in the crow's feet, just little skinny lines. Break that up a little bit, and then just barely soften. Don't scrub hard, just barely catch and soften just a little bit. You're not having to blend it out, you're just kind of blotting it a little bit. Okay, then I want to go in front of the eye. I'm right up against the eye. There again, just a small area, and let it just kind of hug a little under and hug a little bit above the eyelid. You're not coming out very far, and just soften that towards the nose a little, because you want that eye socket to be a little bit darker. Then I need a blush color. You have lots of choices for your cheek color. Now, I like to use Naphthol Red Light, and then I just use some of the warm beige to lighten it up to a pretty kind of coral color. Otherwise, there is in Americana, there's some pretty coral colors that work great for cheek colors. Coral Blush is actually a pretty cheek color. That would work nicely too. And that's about the color that I'm mixing actually. So I could just use that instead if I wanted to. And I do use the extender right along with the Americana as well as Traditions. So it works with either one. Or if you have the Josonia retarder, they will work and intermix with any of the brands. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and, as long as I pulled it out, I'm going to go ahead and use that coral blush. Otherwise, if you've got Naphthol Red Light, still going to use my double-ended brush, so I'm going to, make sure both ends are clean, dip it in extender, wipe them off on my paper towel. Still loading it exactly the same. Really plumping it up in my brush. Just a couple little dabs is not going to do it. I want you to really, pounce that in quite a bit. You're really getting that into your bristles. So you're putting it in and pouncing off the excess at the same time. Let's see. Okay, we're on the third picture now. Let's go ahead and do the lip first. So I want to do this back corner and across the top. So take a look before I blend it. Okay, I just rough that in there, and then I just soften where I stop. So the front edge of the lip looks like it's got a little highlight. Now I'll be coming down on top of that lip with my mustache tips, so it's not going to look as big after I put my mustache in. I also want to get on the bottom of the nostril and bottom tip of the nose. Okay, and then soften. And he's been out in the cold. I'm sure you guys that are living in the cold regions, you know how red our noses get when we're out in the cold too long. And then one more will be the outer edge of the cheek. There again, I lay that in pretty good. Really lay that in solid. Okay, and then flip the brush and just barely catch that edge to soften it. Light, light touch. I only use pressure if it has dried too much and I have to do a little loosening, but most often you want to have the lightest touch possible. And then I do like to put just a couple little streaks in the crow's feet, just so that it looks like that color has kind of melted up into, you know, the crow's feet just a little bit. We do want to put the little highlights in the eye. So when we look at our, let's see, get the right picture here. When we look at the picture, what I want to do is it's almost like there's a window reflecting in his eye. So I actually got these a little bit square. So I've got a little bigger one and then a tiny dot and then a little wash of white in the bottom of his iris. Okay, so we're going to use the titanium white. I'm just going to use my liner brush. And I'm going to take the white, and you should be able to just use water to thin it. Okay, but I want to get a little square and then a little dot next to that. And then I want to get a little bit brighter white in the bottom of his iris. And a little bit more of a wash down there. Okay. Then I do want to use the black, and there again, just thin it with some water. Use my liner brush. So half paint, half water, so that it's ink-like consistency. And I do want to just outline the outer edge because I want that to be a little bolder than what I had it, outer edge of my iris. And then I'm going to go above and below the eye. But when I do the one above, I'm going to come out beyond. That'll be my first eyelash. But then I come back and I outline that top edge and outline the bottom edge. Okay, then I want to add some more eyelashes with the black. Take a close look at your photograph to the direction that they're growing. They kind of curve to the front on top, and they get smaller as you come back towards that back corner. So I just want some little lashes, little teeny tiny little touches as I get to the corner. And the bottom lashes, just a few in that front half. Don't go all the way back. First one's going to hang off the front edge. And it's only about 5 lashes on that bottom one. Every time I do a Santa, he's going to have a little bit different expression, even though it's my pattern and I trace it on the same. It depends on the mood that you're in, and it depends on your own family members. You're used to looking at their eyes, their noses, their lips, and I'll guarantee you that it's going to look more like someone in your family than my design. Let's see. Okay, then let's go ahead to the eyebrow. Okay, now you're going to notice on mine, I got my fur really close to my eyebrow. Now, if that bothers me, what I could do right now is I could put some lines of my flesh in there to separate it. And let me just do that. Normally I would leave it, but I want you to know how to make corrections. So if I take my liner brush, I could just add some lines of that warm beige, see, and crop out some of that fur so that I have more space between my fur and my eyebrow. There's always a way to fix, you know, little things, to tweak them a little bit, but see how it's just an easy fix. I don't want to base it in where I've got a hard line next to the fur. That's why I use the liner brush and little lines to get that back in there. So I create more separation there. All right, so now what I want to do on this eyebrow, I want white on the top tips, and then I may or may not need to float some shadow underneath. And if I do, it's going to be with burnt umber. So I'm going to take a little out just in case. Take a little bit of burnt umber out. Don't need much, but I'll be using that in the fur anyway. Okay, so now I want to get, use my liner brush. I'm just going to use water and some of the titanium white. Then it was some water. I don't want it too transparent, so just enough so that it's going to come off your brush. I want it to be a little bit more solid. Now, I want these tips to kind of go different directions a little bit. I'm not going all the way to the bottom. I want to keep it more on the top half. But make them kind of flip-flop a little because it looks more natural to have a little bit irregular, kind of crazy eyebrows. Now on mine, I still have enough darkness. I don't need to put dark on mine. But if I didn't have that, I would put a little float of burnt umber after the white dries, or even just pull some little burnt umber lines. In fact, let me go ahead and do mine to where I have to do that so that you see how to correct if you needed to. Okay, so I'm going to make more white than what I want. So I'm getting too carried away with the white, okay? So now I've kind of lost the dimension. So now I want to go back with some burnt umber, just thin it with water, and I'll make some little lines coming up from the bottom. And that'll help break that up again. There we go. I'm going to add just a couple of the medium white back in the middle just to break up because I want to be able to see three colors. So I want to see medium white, white, and then a dark. So I'm just get a little bit of that in the middle. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do next is I want to do the first layer on the hat, and that's using the Naphthol red light. And if you needed in the Americana, you're going to mix equal parts of true red and cadmium orange. So it's kind of an orangey red. And it's a really pretty highlight color on the burgundy. Okay, now this time on the hat, I'm going to moisten it with extender first. And it's okay if it looks blotchy because it's velvet. Okay, it doesn't need to be as smooth as what we did on our face, but I want you to try the two different ways of using the extender. The first way we used it, we only used it in our face in the brush. This time I'm going to moisten the surface. So what I do is I take my 1/2 inch angle and I get the extender in there, but I'm really wiping it all off on the edge of the cup, or you can blot it on your paper towel. It's going to look like there's nothing in there. And I'm going to use that to moisten. All I want is a little bit of a shine. Sometimes I'll even take the blender brush and use that to rub it in. So I'm just kind of rubbing it in the wood, in the hat. You don't have to stay in the lines because it'll disappear, it'll dry clear. Just so that there's a shine. I don't want any puddles, just barely moistening on that hat area. It'll just give me a little bit better chance to blend. Still going to make sure that I have, you know, extender in both ends, but really rub the extra extender out this time in the blender and also in the round. So make sure it's just a little drier, but it's still in there. Okay, gonna load the brush. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at this top corner again, and you can see where I've got highlights. I've got on the top edges of the curves, I've got coming down the right side of the tail, and another one separating in the middle of the tail. So when I do this, just do one section at a time. So I want it nice and thick, and then pull in, give it a little bit of a curve, okay? And I'm just gonna soften the underneath area. Now this time, if you wanna do a little bit more of a stipple, you can, because it's supposed to have a little texture, being velvet. So I'm just gonna kind of pounce a little bit on that edge, okay? And then I'll come get a little bit more on the brush. I'll do the next bump, come in where it dents in, give it a little flip maybe, and just kind of pounce, just catching that bottom edge. And do that to each of the curves. Nice and thick on the top edge. And then just barely kind of stipple to catch that bottom edge. And see how you have those nice dark separations between the two. Now, if you got carried away, you could always come back with your burgundy in the dark area again and just do a reverse of what you just did. And then I want to come down the tail of the hat. So I got to start up above the fur and come down along that right edge. There again, nice solid color. I'm going up above the fur a little bit because the tail is flipping down over the fur. And then come on the other side and stipple that edge. Get that to blend in. Let it be texture. And then another line right in the middle. And I'm only going to do the left edge. I'm only going to soften that left edge. So take a look at my line in the middle of the tail before I soften it. See, I lay it in solid. And then I'm just going to stipple that left edge of that stripe. And then that's all we need to do at this stage. So you can clean your brush. Make sure your blender brush is clean also. And when you go to clean this brush before you put it away, I go ahead and I clean it with soap and water or even hand sanitizer. But then I can re-dip it in the extender and let the extender dry in there. It's like a conditioner. Or I can use hair conditioner and recoat the bristles with regular hair conditioner, let it harden in there, and then wash it out before I use it again. The hair conditioner will also condition the hairs. And now if you're using, to store this brush, if you're using like a bin or a cup to put them in, take a straw and slice it, wrap it around the end that's going to go down into your cup, and just tape that on there so that you're not wrecking the bottom end of the brush. Now I want to get some shadows going in the beard and in the fur. So now when you look at this photo that shows some brown or dark shadows, I use it to kind of help separate some of the curls from each other. I'm going to put it under the lip and the mustache. I can, separate some of the waves. I could put it next to the tail of the hat on both sides to help darken that, and, some next to the holly and the other hat. So it's going to get kind of dirty looking with this next stage. I am actually just going to use an angle brush this time and just water because I want it to dry fast. And this does not need to be an accurate blend, okay? Because we'll be coming back on top with little white strokes of color. Now, you'll need probably a combination of your angle, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch, whatever you have. Smaller areas, use your small one. Bigger areas, use your big one. I'm going to go ahead and start with the mustache, I think. Just using water in the brush this time. Now, I could use extender, but then it's going to take longer for everything to dry. So because this just is going to be a little more choppy, so I get a corner load of burnt umber. And I want to get that under the nose. And see, I kind of chop it in rather than pulling a smooth stroke. So I got the tip with the color on is up under the nose, and I just kind of chop it across the top of that mustache to get it darker. I really want it dark in that little opening of the nostril though, so I'm going to get a little bit more on the corner and where that little opening is, get that a little darker. Otherwise, I just use the chisel edge, and I just want it in that area under the nose. Just kind of chop that in so that it'll be pretty dark. We exaggerate the darkness now because when we come back with our lighter color, it disappears. I'm going to do the same thing under the lip and under the mustache. Just kind of chop it in. In fact, you can even just pull, with the chisel edge of that angle, just pull it into the hair a little bit. You're not trying to blend it. Just drag some down in a little ways with the chisel edge. And I'm going to go right on out to the tip of the mustache there and just drag it down in. Okay, I also want to do on the fur next to the tail of the hat, and then there again, just drag some out so the color goes next to the tail of the hat, and just drag some dark chisel edge, drag some out. If you got too solid in your hat, this would be a good time to go ahead and chop a little bit in to kind of create some individual rows. I just use the chisel edge and just chop a little between the rows. And then when I do my brighter white, it'll blend in just fine. Okay, I'm going to get some next to the tail of the hat. So just kind of come down. There again, let it be a little bit choppy. Next to the holly. Doesn't need to come out very far. Just want to set it in a little bit. Next to the ball of the hat. And just kind of chop it in a little. And same thing on the other side of the tail and the holly. So I'll turn it upside down so I can get the angle better. Don't be afraid to drag some of that down into the longer areas, but Definitely want to get a little darker next to the holly. And even go a little bit around the ball of the hat. Just chopping it in, does not need to be smooth. And I don't know if you can see, I've got little, kind of washy shadows here that are not smoothed out, and I'm not worried about those. Those are all going to disappear when I do my line work. So I'm not trying to fix any of that. I like to use the little bit bigger one to do the rest of the beard now, because I want to separate some of the curls, create some individual waves. Even if I don't have a separation right now, I can make a separation. So I've got my 1/2 inch angle brush this time. Normally when I float color, what I do is I get it wet and I wipe this off really well on the edge of my cup. Now, depending on your surface, sometimes you need more moisture, sometimes you need less. I start with that first. Then if I need to blot it on my towel, I will, but otherwise I need that little extra moisture to keep me going here. Corner load of the burnt umber still. Just a little corner load, blend the extra off. A little bit more of a wash this time. Still not worried about blending this because I will be coming over it with lines. Okay, so now I've got this great big area here that looks like it's all one great big chunk off on the side of my piece. So what I want to do is I want to pick some spots and separate some of those areas, and it'll make it look when I go back like they're individual little curls. And just there again, just roughing it in. But that'll help to break up some of that area that is too much the same. So a little bit more of a wash maybe. And come through and kind of separate some of your little curl areas. Just kind of hit and miss. And that's probably good enough.